I'll tell you the story of when we hired our first employee. I was so stressed to make that step where we had people on payroll. It was like, oh man, we have people on payroll. Their life depends on the job and the company existing. Cheers. Not over the laptops, but
slowly over the laptops.
That would be an expensive mistake. Quite an expensive mistake. I'll set this away.
For those of you who don't know, Dhruv is currently running a edtech startup.
Co-founder. Yeah.
I want to ask you, first of all, what did you study in college?
Computer science. We had a couple classes together, remember?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, you were building the startup on the side.
Yep. Yeah, it was like the number one way I could test my skills and also build my resume. And we had customers since day one, really. And so we were always building for them the entire time. Like the driving factor for the improvement was always that a customer had a problem or we wanted to make it better for them. And we've been doing that for 5 years. So, yeah.
So you've had customers from day one.
I mean, we did build an initial product with no customers. We just kind of winged the initial version without even talking to anyone, which is not the way you build products. But, we threw up a landing page and we just started having people show up. Like when I was when I was a freshman at Penn State, like we had a couple customers already, like 4 or 5, something like that.
So did you know starting this project in high school that this was going to be something you'd be,
oh my God,
dedicating so much of your life to?
No, not at all. I mean, I just turned 23 and I've spent 5 years on this thing. What is that? That's like close to like
a fifth of your life almost.
Yeah, a fifth of my life almost. Yeah. Has been this thing.
But seeing that you had customers from day one, it must have been like pretty motivating versus like just working on this thing and having no one care.
Scary.
Scary.
Yeah, because like as an 18-year-old, you're like, oh man, there's an entire school using my product. It's gotta work.
Right. Like who knows how many hundreds of students.
Yeah. It was definitely scary back then, especially when like there were things that were obviously bad, and they're like, "Yo, I paid money for this." Like,
right?
You
gotta fix it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Is what you do now different from what your 18-year-old self was doing?
Yeah, I feel like 18-year-old self me was really learning, like pretty much just how to get the stuff done. There was a lot less considerations. It's more about just get it working, right? And like it's a brand new project. Like there's no other code. Just figure it out. YouTube, Stack Overflow, Google. Now we have CI/CD. We have tests. I mean, there's so many users using our app, right? And so we can't have outages. Like we just can't. You can't ship a bug.
I mean, engineering is definitely a part of what you do. Building out this new app.
Yeah,
I'd say it's a lot more.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's all. I'd say more engineering now than it was then. Like then it was less engineering and more just like software, just getting it to work, like taking a bunch of easy building blocks and putting it together. I mean, now it's like, some of these features are complex, like, and the problem is like, you need to consider the performance aspects because you've got a lot of people using it, right? So that's always been the most exciting part for me. It's just like, okay, sure, like I can get it working when there's 3 requests happening in like a minute, right? But now I need to handle 100 requests a second. And then it's like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like I've actually got to think about this. So like our software gets 900 requests a second at peak load around like 11 Pacific, which is like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, East Coast. And a lot of our schools are in Ohio and Penn State. Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Right. And you have to build for that.
Yeah. You have to build for that. And I mean, right now it's not like a serverless thing where like it automatically scales up. So like we do burn a lot of money just keeping things ready for load, and we're not automatically scaling things up and down, which we could be. But the priority right now is not to save money. It's to ensure rock solid reliability. Yeah. Because we had so many problems this school year, and we can't risk anything.
You've definitely learned a lot then. I mean, going through all those problems.
Yeah, trial by fire for sure.
So I want to ask, first of all, what did your project look like starting out? 18-year-old Dhruv building this.
Yeah.
And second question, if you were to go back and just redo the foundations, what would you change?
Yeah. So back when we first started, it was like really bad. It took so much effort to get our Golang code base to a place where we could handle load. And there were just a ton of problems all over the place. Like, for example, we never had timeouts on any requests. And so things that would take long would just back up everything else. Yeah, there were Go routines, but like, for example, if your CPU only has 4 cores, like you can have an infinite number of Go routines, but you're not going to make progress on any of them, right? And especially if you have a database, now it's like, oh, it's holding a transaction for a long period of time and you're not canceling it. And so that's causing lock contention on
the whole entire database.
Yeah, the entire database. Yeah. So it would take you down if something would last for like a minute, right? And so I remember this one week where for every single request on every single database call, I had to update the function so that it would pass something called like a context. And the way contexts work and Go with requests is that you have this context object, you pass it to all your database calls. Golang Go routines use the context to basically cancel themselves and close themselves if it gets canceled. So you can imagine this one request, the moment it ends or times out, everything, all the work that it spawned just kind of like dies and goes away.
And Go too. Why did you pick Go?
So I wasn't the backend developer in the beginning, and we just chose Go because it was cool. That's about it. We wanted to learn it. Yeah, it's a cool language. It's still a cool language.
So starting out, you didn't work on the back end directly. Mm-mm. You had some like partners.
Yep, I had some early partners. Yeah,
but you stuck around. They didn't. Any reason why you stuck around?
I don't know. I just feel like I felt like it could keep going, and I always thought it could be. Like, I thought I could make it more, and there were points where I definitely wanted to quit. I remember like really being really frustrated. I'm like, I'm just gonna quit this thing. Like, I already spent so much time on it. Like, it's literally half of my life. Like, throughout college, it was just half of my time that I spent at college was really on SmartPass. So it's like, yeah, I want to quit this thing. I want to go have a fun college, thing. And but COVID honestly gave me a lot of quiet, lots of coding. I was having so much fun, honestly.
So going back then, would you make any changes with how you design your front end, back end?
Oh yeah, all over the place. Yeah, totally.
What are some principles that you can summarize?
Yeah, there's this thing called the repository data access pattern. Okay, it's used in C# applications, all over C++ applications, like all over the place. I learned it from working at DoltHub, and then I looked into it and I skimmed some books and whatever. And so now I get it. But essentially, you need to make interfaces for all your database interactions. And then on top of that, you need to make interfaces for how you're going to use those database functions to do something. So for example, imagine you have an Apple service that lets you buy and sell apples. You'll have an Apple repository interface, which wraps all your database functionality. And you can have something called store an apple, delete an apple, listed apples, right? Mm-hmm. And then in your higher level function, like you'll have something called sell an apple, and it would say like, okay, what is the product SKU? Who are you selling to? Who are you selling from?
Those are the parameters it would take.
Exactly. And so then your domain layer, which is like the higher up one, will be like, okay, update the apple from this owner to this other owner.
By higher up, you mean closer to the server?
So like imagine everything in your database is within your domain.
So you're saying the repositories are
it's like your internal. It's like your internal functionality, things that are not external.
Okay, and you'd make those repositories for all your domain stuff.
Yeah. For every SQL table, you would have your own repository. And so, okay, so you've got some domain level functionality where you can sell an apple between two people, and you've got some repository level functionality where you're like, list this, delete this, update this. Okay. So the functionality lives at the domain layer, and then you've got like this SQL layer that's also written interfaces. And this is just really good because then you have interfaces that you can reuse over and over, and you don't need to worry about the implementation. And then you can switch the implementation out whenever you need to. So for example, if you need to add caching at a particular layer, it's really easy to do that. And it's hard to understand how necessary it is until you have the problem.
Right.
And like there's probably a book out there that explains like how necessary this is and like the types of problems you're going to run into. But I learned it from experience, and oh my gosh, yeah, it's just so much better than what we were doing. But then again, we were also like not doing great things. Like we were writing raw SQL in like the same function that's handling network requests and stuff. And so it was really like the functions were really long. Like they would take up like, I don't know, 400 or 500, 600 lines of code for a single request on the same page. You'd be scrolling through it, trying to figure out what the heck is happening. And we would duplicate SQL calls all over the place. And so you would change the schema, and then you would have to update like 20 different call sites.
Right.
So it was awful. No. It was just amateur coding. If you're duplicating code, you shouldn't be duplicating code. If you need to change the functionality, now you have to go find where the duplicates are. That can be hard sometimes. And the worst part is sometimes you don't even know what you're going to have to change. That's the worst part, because then it's like, okay, I'm trying to estimate to someone how long this is going to take. And so you don't know.
Yeah.
So like potentially like the way you're thinking about it in your head is like, oh, it'll take a week, right? And then like 3-4 days in, you're like, oh my God, this is not going to take a week. And, people were relying on that deadline to schedule a bunch of other work, right? Mm-hmm. And now you're going to tell them it's not going to take a week. It's going to take 3 weeks. And they're like, oh, why didn't you just tell me it was going to take 3 weeks? And so it's just tough.
Would you say those repositories are essentially the same principle as avoiding duplication?
Yeah, wrap every database call in a function and then reuse the function when you need to. Don't just copy the SQL query again.
Right.
And I think part of it is when you're writing the function, you have to kind of abstract some functionality away. Like you have to like simplify every step of the way so that when you're writing the function, you can think in terms of how it's supposed to behave and not how it actually, like what it's actually doing, Right.
Think about the high level details.
Yeah.
Like I want to sell an apple.
Right.
Not like, how do I get this bank account linked?
I think that's the cool part. Like for example, at a high level, I'm going to sell an apple to you. And then at a lower level, it's going to be like, I need to transfer money from your account to my account. And we need to transfer the apple's owner from me to you, right? And then a layer deeper, it's going to be like, okay, I'm going to use this query to query my database for the apple, and I'm going to convert this generic instance of a database object into my actual apple type that I use. Okay. And then a layer deeper, it's going to be like, okay, I have to take the SQL query and now parse it into something. Well, I have to take the SQL query and send it to my database. Potentially use like I don't know. I have to pick a connection to use. So like potentially this connection pooling or whatever. And then a layer deeper is going to be like, okay, I have to figure out how to send this query over the network. And then a layer deeper is going to be like, I have to figure out how to encode this data into bytes so I can send it across the network.
Right.
And then a layer deeper is going to be like, okay, I have to send these bytes. How the hell do I do that? But it's super interesting. I've always been interesting all the way through, like what the heck is happening. And I don't understand much past like the NANDs and OR gates and whatever.
I feel like there's not much past that. That's like the bottom layer.
Yeah. There's huge gaps in my knowledge, definitely.
Yeah, so many layers of things to know to do something right.
Yeah, it's insane. It's engineering. It's hard. It's definitely hard.
If you're gonna work as like a software engineer at like an entry level job, they're not gonna have you, go do everything from the front end to the engineering on the back end.
No.
But it's an interesting question. Like, how do you divvy up the tasks between these layers of complexity?
It's so hard, especially if you're a small company. You just want someone that can implement the whole thing. And like for sometimes like at the early stage, you don't have entry level tasks to give people. You understand?
Yeah.
And so you don't hire entry level people then at the beginning, right?
Right. So if you're a small stage company, you can't really afford to specialize. Everyone needs to be pulling massively.
Everybody's doing everything. Yeah, everybody's doing everything. So you hire generalists, right? Like for me, as one of the founding engineers, like, okay, at the beginning, I only knew the iOS app, but I could handle the whole thing, right? It wasn't me doing the front end, someone else doing the back end for the iOS, well, the network side.
But other than the Go, right?
Other than the Go, yeah. But then eventually, like now I'm fluent in our entire stack, whether it's the iOS app, the web front end, the Angular back end, our infrastructure, our cloud hosting stuff, DevOps, CI/CD, right? I'm pretty proficient everywhere, I feel like. Like I can hire people and know how to hire them, right? At least I know what to put. I know how to like put the interview questions together, like kind of get the gist out of them, right?
Yeah.
But I think building interviews is something I'm bad at, and I think I can do a lot better there.
Let's talk about hiring, because I think a lot of people starting companies, they're not going to have expertise across, not just engineering.
It's tough.
Sales.
You got to have another job first. Like you've got to have experience in something, right?
Or just insane mentorship.
Yeah, insane mentorship, or I don't know, access to Google. You have ChatGPT now. I mean, it's easier to start a company than it was 5 years ago, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But can ChatGPT help you hire? Like if you don't, I feel like knowing what to ask for, right? The whole point of interviews is not to know something. It's like knowing how to tell if someone else knows something.
Yeah, it's hard. Like if you're a non-technical founder and you want to build something, it's probably going to be like you need to find a friend who knows this stuff, right? You need to find a co-founder. And then you need to get a sense of how good your co-founder is on that. And I think Y Combinator has explanations for all this stuff. Like, don't take it from me.
Right.
Go read Y Combinator.
Go read their essays.
Yeah, go read their essays. Yeah.
But I am interested in your thoughts on like building a team, because you have built a team.
Like very recently built a team. Yeah.
Yeah. You've learned a lot in the past year.
Yeah.
Through your previous job.
Yeah.
And of course your startup.
Yeah.
So what are some general principles that you've learned?
Yeah.
Things to guide by.
Yeah. Some things are kind of obvious. You need to make sure that when you're hiring, you actually have a need for that position. So first you need to write up the position that you're hiring for and be very detailed in everything that they need to do. And you have to raise the bar there. Like imagine that you had the best person in that role and ignore their salary. Don't worry about the salary. Like when you're writing the job posting, like figure out what they actually just need to be good at and like what would make someone exceptional, and like flesh out that job posting. And then after that, go research and compare and figure out what the title should be, what the compensation should be, and work yourself backwards from the need. But you have to start at the need. Like you have to analyze like, what the heck am I trying to do? What am I trying to speed up? Like ideally, like I would duplicate myself. But like on top of that, like I want someone with experience with XYZ, right? I don't know. I feel like this is a hard question.
Yeah. There's no easy answer.
There's no easy answer. Yeah. It's really complicated.
I mean, hiring is complicated because you have to also consider your own runway.
Yeah.
So,
oh my gosh. Yeah. It's crazy. And it's oh my gosh. I'll tell you the story of when we hired our first employee. I was so stressed to make that step where we had people on payroll. Where it's like, man, we have people on payroll. Their life depends on the job and the company existing.
That's such a critical moment in the life of the startup.
Yeah,
because before that, it's like co-founders can,
I mean, they don't want it to shut down. I mean, honestly, the best way to start a company is to go full time, is to raise money and go full time. Everybody agrees on that, but building it part time is still possible. It's just way harder.
But there is a critical point when it's no longer just the co-founders. It's you're bringing on someone who
is totally outside.
Totally outside.
Wants a job.
Isn't necessarily involved with the governance or the ownership side of things.
It's gradual though. It's pretty gradual. Like the first employee is obviously going to be like automatically they're going to be, well, hopefully if you're doing a good job, like they're going to want ownership in the company, right? Like you'll give them a couple %, right?
Right. I did want to ask like how that works. Like,
yeah,
I guess there is a difference between like a freelancer versus your first employee.
Yeah. I mean, like think about a startup at the early stages, you're not making much money. So you don't even have that much money to spend. Right. Mm-hmm. And so you can only make one hire.
Yeah.
If you're only going to make one hire, then you might as well make that hire really, really good and pay them like a very great salary, right? And find someone fantastic, because if it's only 2 people, they're going to be a third of your company. Like the company is the people, right?
Yeah.
They're literally going to be a third of your company.
Right. So it makes sense to give them a bit more ownership.
Yeah.
I mean, what if you're like on a very bootstrap startup? Like maybe, is it possible to like pay a less than decent salary but still offer? Like,
yeah.
ownership?
I mean, then you got to give good equity, right? And then you have to convince them, right?
Yeah. And that's the other thing.
Yeah. It's starting. Yeah. Doing this it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. It's super complicated. Yeah. A lot of times it's like crazy, like how much effort it takes, but then you get so lucky along the way. So
Yeah. Just even starting with the idea. I mean, that's just like,
yeah.
is it a good idea or is it not?
Yeah. I don't know. We got lucky. Yeah. In our case, we got really lucky. And the timing was near perfect.
With COVID, yeah.
Yeah. It was near perfect.
Anyways, we talked about knowing that there's a need for a role when you're hiring, right?
Knowing your needs. Yeah.
And I think we touched on like actually being able to afford your needs.
Yeah. I mean, it's easier when you like have a fixed budget to make these decisions. Like you need an example. Like for example, you only have $200,000 to spare, right? And sometimes you don't even have that money. Like you don't even know if you're going to have that money, but you need to make the bet that you will.
Right.
It's scary, but it's financial math, right? And you just have to plan ahead and think about like, okay, how many customers could you potentially add in the next, 3-4 months? How much money will they bring on, right?
Yeah.
And then hire like you've already had it. And like, then you start thinking about, okay, now I need to build cushions in case it doesn't happen. Yeah, it gets complicated, but usually common sense takes you pretty far. Yeah.
Man, bootstrapping a startup does not sound fun.
No.
Hiring
That's
based on
why you need
promise.
to. So look, if you can't even convince another person that your idea is good, you shouldn't run the startup. Like if
Yeah.
you can't raise money, that's the ultimate test. That's the first test, right?
Right.
If you can't convince anybody else, if you can't find a co-founder, you shouldn't start the company. You shouldn't invest $15,000 if you can't even convince someone else to join you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of things is like you can do a lot before you spend a single dollar. And so you need to do all of that as much as you can before you spend any money, right?
Yeah.
Like,
What are some examples?
Okay, so here's I think the biggest thing is like you don't need to build an app for your business, right? Work on the business first, then build the app, right? The app is just the infrastructure for your business. For example, there is this app called Lug. It's for moving nearby, and they're really good at doing things short notice. The quality of service is really high. They will move your thing from A to B. All of that doesn't need an app. The core business is getting your stuff from point A to point B and making you happy along the way, right?
Right.
And collecting money for that. You can do that with paper and pencil,
Right.
other than advertising, right? In fact, you could put posters around the city for free without an app, right?
Yeah. Just call someone up to pick something up.
Exactly.
And the app just facilitates that.
Yeah. The nice part is, okay, I mean, in the modern day now, maybe you want to track your stuff. You want to have the listing online. You want to have a website. Okay, those are all things you can put together even with no technical knowledge, right? And you can use like low code or no code tools to kind of make something that looks like an app. And so you can do that with pretty minimal amount of money, right? You can still hire people to build low code solutions, but they're cheaper than developers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so you can get like, you need to do all that and prove that your business actually works before you do anything else.
I think that's an interesting point. In the startup world, I feel like there's two types. I mean, like on one hand, you have an existing business model and you want to make it better. And on the other hand, you have like crazy technical startups that are trying something brand new.
Deep tech, yeah.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, like for example, that pork meat on broccoli idea that we had saw.
Oh yeah, pork
okay,
cells.
For the viewers, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I saw this ad for lab grown meat. If you don't know what lab grown meat is, essentially they take meat cells and they grow it on like I don't know how they grow it in like bags of like fluid that's just lets the meat grow. But the problem with lab grown meat is that there's no structure, so it ends up just coming out like biotic mush. Ooh.
Yeah.
I don't want that. And so you need to give structure to the meat cells to actually, like the protein cells, to build something that looks like meat. Okay. And so it seems like this company had the idea of taking their meat cells and growing it on broccoli to give it structure. And then the point is, like, you order this packaging, it comes with packaging, you open it, and then you put the broccoli in like
the
oven sheet and you just bake it. Yeah. And then you have pork and broccoli, which is like, that's an American dish, but now you have pork broccoli.
Pork covered broccoli.
Yeah. But like for that, like, I don't think you can, maybe you can grow that stuff at home if you're smart. But like, I think it's more they raise money and hire people to do it for them, right?
Right. And that just comes down to being able to convince partners to join you.
Yeah. And honestly, like, they probably got pretty far already. Like the pork on broccoli thing sounds too creative for it to be the first attempt. Like, it was probably like they want to do lab grown meat, and now we're thinking of ways to sell it, right? And so like, why don't we grow it in broccoli?
Right.
Like, introduce it to the market, right?
Yeah. And that's something all startups need to do. You have an idea, but you actually have to integrate it with the market.
Yeah. Sometimes the thing that you start is not what ends up happening. It's like totally different. In the beginning, anything works.
Anything. Just
get it working. It'll just work no matter what. Like, you don't have to think about it. Just like put the text on the page, connect it up to the API, and just hit go. Okay.
Just get the customers working. Get it in front of the consumers.
Yeah. Then it's like, okay, I'm adding a lot of features. I'm still adding a lot of features. 3 months later, I'm still adding a lot of features. And now all of a sudden you've got a bigger app. And it's like, okay, we want to make a new UI. Then you're like, oh my God, how can I make a new UI with what I just wrote? It's all
spaghetti.
The button is making an API call on the next function call down.
Yeah. Seems about right.
And it's like, if I want to change what the button is doing, I'm going to have to rewrite the whole app, essentially.
A lot of refactoring.
Yeah.
First, you scale your product, right? At what point do you have to transition to scaling your org, your people?
It's the same time. It's all at the same time.
All at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess when you have to add that like new UI, you might be at the point where you can afford a new hire, right?
Yeah, I'll give you a good example. So for the longest time, when we were working on the company, all the work was very asynchronous. And for long periods of time, we wouldn't do deployments, okay? And sometimes we would have a feature that we want to be working on longer term, and then at the same time be working on smaller things that we can ship immediately, okay? And so in Git, you would make a branch, and you'd be working on the branch for a very long time, like potentially a month or longer. The project is moving pretty slowly. Like, imagine just a bunch of part-time people, right? And so we had a master branch, which we use for staging, and then we had a production branch, which we used for production. And so for sometimes, like, it would be a very long time before master got merged into the production branch. And the reason is because you're working on a bigger feature while you're also shipping smaller stuff. Okay.
Right.
And the moment we started adding people to the team, like, that needed to happen more frequently. Like, I would have to be merging, like, I would have to merge master production almost every single night. And the problem was like the master production branches would get out of sync. Like, sometimes people would ship things directly to the production branch and it would get shipped. Sometimes they'd put it on the master branch. It hasn't been fully tested because nobody's using it that much, right? And you forget about it for a week. And then that Friday you like merge the two. You do a review, but you miss something, right? And then something's broken in production. And the reason why you didn't catch it immediately, and that person has already context switched onto another project, right? Now they're coming back, context switching again to come back. The person thought it was good to go. And then a review happened. Everybody thought it was good to go, and they merged it. But it wasn't being used because it was on staging, right? It wasn't in production. And then somewhere down the line, you do the merge, and then you're like, something broke, but it's like not the thing that I just thought I was working on, though. Like, something else broke.
Yeah.
And then you'd remember, like, when was the last time we did this merge, and what changed since then? And potentially it could be a lot. And so it's bad. So, like, you don't want to do this. So what we had to do is, like, get rid of the two branches thing and just have a master branch like everybody else does it. And then, you merge, it deploys to staging, and then it's the developer's job to push it to production almost immediately. And so then it's like if something breaks, like, okay, very obvious what broke it. I can go and fix on it. Like the developer hasn't started working on a different thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we had to make this change because we had more people on the team and we're shipping faster.
Right. Where before you could just hold off on.
We could just hold off for like a month. Like you just push the project for like a month. Which is terrible. And then on top of that, you want to enable all this work. And so now you have to add feature flags all over the place to control like these new parts of your application. And I'm sure you've dealt with feature flags, right?
Many times.
Yeah. What do you use for feature flags, by the way?
Where?
What do you use? Firebase feature flags?
Yeah, we just have a variable in the root document. Imagine you have a table.
So we enable features by customer. And so we use a database table.
Right. So we were talking about scale. And how to achieve it.
Yeah. What does achieving it mean?
Not failing, I should say.
What does not failing mean?
Not having outages due to lack of scale.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, not failing your customers.
Yeah. I mean, like, what does that even mean? Like, it's such a... Like, you have to measure... You have to have a goal, right?
It comes down to retention, right?
It does come down to retention. So, like, let's start there. Like, you want to retain 90% plus of your customers every renewal cycle.
Right. And if they don't like your product for whatever reason,
right,
outages, then that goes down. And
so, like, for example, okay, high level goal, I want to retain 90% of my customers. Okay. From there, you're going to be like, okay, 5% of the customers we're going to lose no matter what, because they never onboarded or, they bought the product, but then never even attempted to get started. Like, there's an industry average for all.
Yeah. Just
all
like
products.
Cyclical unretention.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. But then now you have this 5% that you can work for, right? That you have to work for.
95%, you mean?
95% that you have to work for. Yeah. It's very holistic. Like the reasons why they may renew or may not renew, right? It might be that there was pushback from parents initially and, it was just such a big hurdle to get over that they don't want to do it again with a whole new set of students and parents, right? It could be that the outages were really bad and they really needed this thing to work and it just wasn't working when they needed to. And so you lost trust. And so over time you stopped depending on it, right? And it wasn't useful because, the product works better when you're using it, right? As for most things, like the more you're using it, the better it is for you.
Right. Two big reasons. So getting your stakeholders on board and being able to rely on the product. Yeah,
rely on it. Like imagine that Slack would have a complete outage like once a week.
Yeah, not great for anyone.
No, like even for a couple hours, you'd already be using a different app at that point, right? You'd be using Discord or something, and then eventually you'd be like, let's just go to Discord or whatever.
Yeah, so reliability is big for retention.
Reliability is big for retention, and so then you work your way backwards, and then it's like, okay, how reliable? Like you can't even ask yourself, like historically you can say how reliable is the product, but then like saying how reliable is your code base is like that's not a real question,
I think with enough experience, like
with enough experience, sure, but like even doing that analysis is really tough. Really tough. The other interesting thing is like you have to just spend money. Like sometimes you just got to make your life easier. Like if you're having a problem, like figure out what you can, like if there are things that you can do to spend money for to fix it, right?
Right.
Like with software, like for me, like my first intention is always like, how do I fix this? And that usually like I'm thinking of things that I can do myself. But now it's like, okay, I've got money. What can I not do myself that I need to get done by X date? How do I use my money to do that?
Yeah,
that's something I'm still learning is like, cause I don't know, I grew up Asian culture. Like I just don't want to spend money, like be really frugal. Maybe just Indian culture, stereotypical Indian culture.
It's same for my family.
Yeah. And it's like, but like, that's not always the best thing to do. Like sometimes you just want to spend the money because otherwise you're going to miss on your goal and you're going to lose customers. Right.
Yeah. I asked that myself too, with regards to like, starting a YouTube channel. Like, should I hire an editor? Like that might be the way.
It might be the way. Yeah.
I just don't. For me, it's also a question of reliability. Like, can I rely on these freelance editors?
Yeah, you just gotta try it. Yeah,
just gotta try it.
Yeah, and then you'll get better over time, like managing them. Like, Like, oh, the other thing is like, you got to ask for what you want.
Right.
Yeah. You really just got to ask. You gotta over explain it to people, especially over the internet. Like, you've got to over communicate what you want to people. And because like everybody has their own language, right? Mm-hmm. So like a word that you use that has a very specific meaning to you does not have the same meaning to the other person. And so there's a lot of the times you're like, oh, darn it. Like, I wanted X. Can you do it for me? Mm-hmm. And so it's so tough. And that's why like having a great team member who just understands what you're saying is great.
Yeah.
And can just do it. It's just like, oh, so good. Like, you just ask for it and it just happens. Like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Last topic I want to talk to you about, I'd like your advice on how do I turn this into something people actually value. Okay, here's what I'm thinking. Like, I'm going to create a bunch of educational videos on like programming stuff. That's what I'm good at anyways. You know, try to make it entertaining. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, is your video useful or not?
And then the other thing I'm immediately thinking of is like, who's your competition? You've even off of YouTube, Coursera, you've got traditional education, right?
Yeah.
Computer science programs from across the world. So like, you've got to narrow your scope.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
We talked about this in my last podcast. Like, there's so many people out there doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
How do you make it
start more specific than nobody else is doing, or pick something specific enough where you can beat everybody else in that specific category, right? Yeah. Like, for example, if you're going to teach someone how to do Minecraft mods, which is what Noah Rubin did actually way back in the day. He's like, he taught people to make Minecraft mods. Like, teach them how to do an extension of a very specific mod, right? That you think is cool and that other people will like.
Create content that is underrepresented. Yeah. Yeah. That's definitely a goal. So my older mate, he's a musician, right?
Yeah.
My idea is like, I want to create like coding tutorials, but I also want to like help build websites for my music friend. So I feel like that might be an interesting mix.
Yeah.
I want to ask you like, what video ideas you'd watch, like
for music?
No, just in general, stuff I might be able to make.
So like my YouTube consumption is very limited nowadays. Exclusively now, it's like shorts.
Exclusively shorts.
Yeah, almost exclusively shorts, because I only open it maybe 5-10 minutes at a time. So it'd have to be short. Usually, I if I'm on YouTube now, I want funny stuff or just lighthearted things. Like, I'm not there for. I haven't looked at a YouTube video for coding stuff in a long time. Like, I'd rather just go read the documentation.
Right.
Just straight up. I mean, here's the thing I haven't seen before, even without any software engineering. Like, your friend writes a song and you have to come up with funny lyrics for it.
That's not really the theme of this channel, but that's definitely cool. I'll suggest that to my friend.
Exactly.
For his YouTube channel.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah. I think you got to start with like what interests you.
Yeah.
Right. Because if you're gonna be bored out of your mind making the content, what's the point?
Yeah, that's a good question. What interests me? You know, I think I just want to create like a open source Facebook clone. Just create it, you know, make it a tutorial for newbie programmers.
My question for you is like, what can you do even before you build the clone, right? Like, what things would you go explore? Like, would you interview and detail a bunch of social media people?
Oh, totally. I've been in my current job for that purpose.
Yeah, exactly. And so you would interview and detail a bunch of people. You would gather a bunch of notes. You would summarize the information. You'd make a thesis about your company, like why this needs to exist. You would potentially try to pitch, right? To just learn how to pitch even. You need to figure out the business model. Like, how are you going to make money, right? Is it a thing you're going to make money from? Like, how does it work? Like, you know, some things don't make money. Like,
Wikipedia.
Like, Wikipedia doesn't make money, but it provides so much value, right?
All right. Here's my 5-minute pitch. All right.
Okay.
So from my interviews, I think the need for a lot of creators and people, you know, not just creators, but potential creators, is being able to showcase your collaborations and really gain value from working with people beyond just the thing you made. And so what I mean by that is, like, I worked on a bunch of projects in school, wrote a few papers, but as much as I can post about that on Twitter or LinkedIn, there's like no platform for where people can see what I've done. Like, solely see that, you know, no one's going to scroll through your Twitter trying to find like when you collaborated with someone and your old projects. And, you know, portfolio websites exist for this purpose.
So like a curated blog.
A curated collaboration platform, yes.
Yeah.
Like imagine Twitter or LinkedIn. Remove all the noise and news, focus solely on who did what with who. And I think bringing that to the surface can provide a lot of value for, I mean, think about it. When you don't know someone, all you have is what they've posted online. And if you can maximize the value from, you know, your 30 seconds you're going to spend reading about someone, I think the best way to do that is just to see what they've done with other people. When you hire someone, what do you look at? Their LinkedIn, their resume?
Yeah, I look at their resume. I look at their LinkedIn. And in the context of software engineering, right?
Yeah. Maybe their website.
Their projects.
Yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I think a missing piece is like who have you worked with, right?
Right. Like normally we have referrals.
Yeah. But sometimes like maybe I want to go explore their other people LinkedIn's, right?
Exactly.
Like who have you been exposed with?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people work on things that they're proud of and they want to show.
Yeah.
It just gets buried in the noise of Twitter.
Yeah.
And LinkedIn. So
yeah.
Anyways, that's the idea. We'll see what comes of it.
Cool. Yeah. Best of luck.
Thanks for coming on the podcast, Drew.
Thanks, Tommy.
It's been great having you. Been a great year.
It's been a great year.
Moving back to the East Coast. LA's been great.
Yeah. Hey, if you're interested in NYC, we should book an apartment in NYC.
Yeah. Maybe we'll see each other in NYC.
Yeah.
Certainly just a visit, but
yeah, certainly just a visit. Yeah.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah. I'll talk about it.
Anyways, thanks.
Thanks.